I chose to cover a double-blind placebo-controlled study published in Translational Psychiatry Journal on August 2nd, 2022 by Kai Vanna et al., covering the topic of microdosing psilocybin mushrooms. Most of the research around mushrooms has been on the anecdotal evidence brought forth by users of this class of drug. There have been claims that they can help improve one's mood, creative skills, and will fix mental health issues. These claims are so widespread by users of the drug that in 2021, the Global Drug Survey released by the United Nations stated that 22% of users of psychedelics, this includes mushrooms, have been used for the potential microdosing. Given all this information, the researchers came into the study with the goal of older studies to examine the effects of mushrooms on behavior, conversion/diversion thinking, perception, and cognition, but they differed in that they wanted to examine underlying brain function behind any altered conditions. They also seek to circumvent flaws by including an EEG machine, selecting participants from a cohort that already had the intention of microdosing, and double blinding to ensure there was no confirmation or expectation bias from either party. In this double-blind experiment, the sample of mushrooms was shipped alongside the placebo of a healthy mushroom from off-site. They were held in similar pill capsules with the same amount of product, 0.5 grams, regardless of the trial. The trial someone was in was randomly selected by a third party. Um, this was done over 3 weeks. Participant would come in, take one of the capsules, go through the questionnaires and activities while in a EEG machine, and then they would come back after a week off. This was all done to control for the conformed behavior and expectation bias, because in past researches, it was unclear whether participants and researchers in other studies were either being incentivized, they had no experience with the drug, or participants were informed with how much they were taking. 34 participants were recruited by word of mouth, social media, or workshops. All of these participants knew what they were getting into. They were planning on microdosing mushrooms for the positive therapeutic effect. They had a mean age of around 31 years and a mean weight of 74 kilograms. There was a slight gender bias in the sample with 11 females and 23 males. And of course, these participants were pre-tested to ensure competence. The following quizzes and questionnaires seen on the slide were used in this study. They measured personality, trait and anxiety, suggestibility, state affect, mind wandering, stress, absorption, well-being, flow, creativity, empathy, and cognitive flexibility, respectively, in the order it is on the slide. The following tasks for creativity were used in this study, and their purposes were as follows. They determined creative potential, listing as many possible uses for an object, assessing divergent thinking, response inhibition, how quickly someone can respond to visual information, and ignoring automatic responses in the order that they're seen on the slide. The EEG system was recorded using a 24 research grade system. It was done with 4 trials for each subject, 1 experimental trial with eyes open, 1 with their eyes closed, 1 placebo trial with their eyes open, 1 with their eyes closed. During these times, the LPDST, or the logarithmic power spectral density of gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta waves, were assessed with first pass being filtered out. 2.5 standard deviations away from the mean were rejected, results were. Finally, this information was analyzed by using the Lempel-Ziv lossless compression algorithm, which accounted for just repeating patterns in data. Statistical analysis was done using the non-parametric paired Wilkins tests for paired data and the Whitney Manning-Yu tests for unpaired data, and they computed the Bayesian statistic in favor of the alternate hypothesis utilizing Jeffers-Zellner-Slow. By the second trial or third week of testing, the participants were able to unblind themselves. 25 of the 34 participants, or 73.5% of people, were able to unblind themselves in the experimental condition, and 24 of the 34 participants, or 70% of participants, were able to unblind themselves in the placebo condition. In other words, the blind section of this study didn't exactly work, and this makes an immense amount of sense. Hallucinogenic effects for placebo conditions in most people are only produced when the individual has a strong belief that something thing is going to happen. Placebo can only take things so far, so either the participant ate the placebo and felt minimal effects, or they ate the psilocybin mushroom and realized several hours later that they microdosed on shrooms. They then would come into the next trial and would have an idea of what awaited them. Unfortunately, this led to kind of a split in how they saw things. They split things into an unblinded category and a blinded category. The test scores for each questionnaire were divided by their maximum value multiplied by 10. So with the big five factor inventory, if the person scored 23, it would be divided by 440. In this case, the score would be 0.05. This was done across all the tests. The only trait across all the tests that showed any form of correlation was the trait of conscientiousness with a p-value of 0.01. The other trait scores were less than one-third of the total, which suggests insufficient evidence to support either the alternative or null hypothesis. There were weak correlations between the alternative use tasks, P 0.03, the Wallach-Kogan P 0.04 tests, which indicated potential increases in creative thinking, but they were rendered insignificant after data analysis utilizing the Buffoni correction to correct for false positives. In both cases, there was insufficient evidence to settle between the null and alternative hypothesis. The only band of LPSD, or logarithmic power spectral density, that was affected by experimental condition was the theta waves, which deal with memory, learning, and emotional regulation. And this only occurred during the experimental eyes closed trial. The other three trials were unaffected. Outside of this, the central frontal channel was most affected by ingestion of mushrooms. A few weaknesses of the study were the concentration of 0.5 grams of the dosage. There isn't really a set standard when it comes to microdosing. The effective dose for the weight was not controlled for. There was also the inconsistent chemical composition in regards to storage. They primarily looked into the short-term effects, none of the long-term effects, and participants were able to unblind themselves during the second week of the study. So to conclude, they found that microdosing induced subjective effects, but changes in performance in other domains were insignificant or mildly indicated impaired performance, much like the dog over there. They thought they were Batman, but they weren't. They suggested looking into the chronic use of mushrooms on an individual's general physiological health, including the function of the 5-HT2B receptors. They suggested keeping a consistent concentration and chemical composition of the sample, and they also suggested controlling for weight and by administering an effective dose for the participant's weight.